Hello, this is Victoria. I see somebody has arrived. I'm setting the screen. You don't need the audio, just the screen. And I'm going to share my screen with you in a second.
Can you hear me?
Just a second, please. My screen is paused. Okay, so.
I'm on my phone. I can't see the
Yes,
screen.
hello there. So, oh, you're on your phone. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
So
problem.
I'll be able to hear.
You'll be able to hear, but you can't see the screen. And, you know, really, I like the questions for the end, and I'm showing the screen. Sometimes there's a little feedback when you're on the phone. Is there a possibility that you can get on a screen to view my presentation?
I got an invitation, but it says like I have to download the app to join.
Really?
So
you can click on the link and open.
Yes, I clicked on the link and then it told me to tap to download or to connect to join the meeting. But then it said that sorry, I can't join from my phone because I have to download the app or something like that. That's what it said. So I just used the other option was to dial all in.
Okay.
But
that's okay then. You'll be able to hear the presentation. You just won't see the screens, but it's okay.
That's fine. Better than nothing.
Okay. So we just, I guess we have two people on, two callers. I'm going to write a quick note here to invite people if they can well, I guess everybody received the same link. It doesn't, okay, so who's here has already received it. So I see caller 1 and caller 2, and I don't see the people on the screen. If you could please, the people that are on the screen, type something on chat to let me know.
Hi, I'm on the phone as well. I don't have a, yeah.
Okay.
I'm on, yeah, as well.
Okay, and so who do we have on the phone, if I may ask?
Alba is my name.
Alba?
My name is Israel.
Israel, okay. Alba, did you join us last time?
I think so. Is this the same presentation? I'm wondering because I found you on LinkedIn. Is this the same?
Yes, it's the same presentation that I'm going to do, the free introductory. You're welcome to stay. I'm just wanted to let you know that it is the same presentation.
Oh, then you know what? If it is the same, I wasn't sure. Then I may not join you, honestly, because, you know, I did appreciate it the last time. You did a great job.
No, I understand. I wanted to let you know it's the same. So, you know.
Are you going to be having any more
of stay, but.
Or, I'm sorry, in the future, are they all going to be pretty much the same, the introduction to court interpreting, the course online? Or you're going to maybe have something else, different workshop?
Well, the free introductory is to give a presentation about what the program is and what it entails to become a court interpreter. Then there's a bunch of paid presentations that, you know, I do it for a fee, really. I do not teach for free. So be happy. You're welcome to join any of the standalone seminars that I'm going to be doing. I've already done a few: team interpreting, court protocol, ethics, use of equipment. So there are different standalone webinars on particular topics. That's one part of my program. That's the theory part. And then there's the practice part, which is a whole program of in total is 36 webinars, but I divided into three 12-week webinars where it's going to be practically all practice with some theory. So the theory webinars that are standalone, the contents of that is also going to be shared with the people that take the full course. And the idea of the full course is to train to become certified. And so that is that's all practice. So you're welcome to join any of those, or stay on this one. Now I'm going to ask you one thing, Alba. My presentations are mostly based on my PowerPoints, and I like to cover the whole thing in an hour and then open it up for questions. Those who are on the phone can interrupt with questions, but I'm going to ask you to please not do so because it takes away from the people who are just looking at the screen and listening to me. And so I don't want somebody to start asking questions in between the presentation and then not be able to cover the whole presentation. Hopefully during the presentation I'll be answering some of the questions that may come up. And at the end, I'll open it up for questions from everybody, with chat. Ideally, those who are on the phone can interact on the phone, but I'll ask that they respect everybody else and do very brief questions because I can't really do a whole dialogue with one person while I have 15 listening, okay? So,
you know what,
I started.
Yeah, well, you know what, since it's the same presentation, and I know we chatted at length the last time, I think I was the only one asking questions, but...
Yes, that's why I remember you, Alba. So I'm going to ask you to be brief. If you want to stay, welcome. If not, I'm going to...
Yeah, actually, I think I'm probably just going to log off, so to speak, or hang up because, if it's the same exact one, I've already learned the information, a lot of which I knew beforehand. So that's fine. But thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. And maybe I'll explore classes and webinars for the future.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I hope everybody can see the screen now. Those who are on the computer, those who are not, will hear the presentation, as I said. Do you all see the cover page that says Introduction to Court Interpreting Online? Okay. And I have the chat window open. As I said, I'm going to open, the chat is open. You can start typing questions, or in between, if you can't hear or something, use the chat to let me know if something happens to the connection.
We're unable to come to the phone right now, but leave a brief message and your number, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, so here we are. We're going to start the presentation with those presents. My name is Victoria Dopazo. As you all know, I'm a court certified interpreter. I hold federal certification and also state certification from the state of Maryland, state of New York, and from NAJIT, the National Association of Judicial Interpreters and Translators. I have the national certification as a translator and interpreter from NAJIT. So the one I put here, FCCI, as you know, is the federal, which is the one that trumps all, but I do have the other certifications. I've been doing court interpreting for 17 years in the state of Maryland mainly. I also interpreted in trials in New York and Virginia. Because of the federal certification, sometimes they hire me out of state, but most of my experience is in the state of Maryland. So most of the examples I'm going to be given in the practice course about hearings and trials and short hearings that you're going to be covering in the state are based in the state of Maryland, but are very similar in other states. But that's based on my real experience, and so that's what most of it consists of. However, the examination is the same all over the country because it's the National Consortium of State Courts that does the court interpreting certification exam, and so the exam is the same all over the country. It doesn't matter what state you take it. Most states now are part of the consortium, so that's the same exam. So the training will help you wherever you're going to take the certification exam. And the idea of the training is help you train towards obtaining the certification. I know that some of the people that are joining me today and that often are interested in my courses are some are already practicing in state courts. Sometimes they are practicing in community settings and medical interpretation and other settings. But the training that I'm going to be providing in the practice course is geared towards obtaining certification for court interpreter. As I said, there are different types of interpreters. The community interpreter that does medical, social work, etc. I mean, interpretation in those settings, and I know some of you have that experience, and that's a very good start to become court certified, because in court you're going to be using all those skills that you use in medical settings and social work settings and in interviews with patients and doctors and schools and other settings. Court really covers it all. To become a court, once you become a court interpreting, you're going to be interpreting in hearings, trials, civil, criminal cases, traffic cases, etc. Most of the interpreters that start as eligible or just certified would start in district court with minor hearings and cases such as traffic and small civil cases. But the training encompasses all the different hearings that you will cover in circuit court as well, because once you're certified, you should be able to work in all of these cases. And also outside of the courtroom, we're called on to interpret cases that are correlated and that have an effect in cases that take place in court. For example, depositions, jail visits, trial preparation with attorneys, or sometimes preparation of witnesses for trial. If somebody doesn't speak English and is going to be called as a witness in a case, first they need to interview that person and see what he or she has to offer to see if they're going to call him or not, or if they decide they're going to call him, they still need to meet and discuss and rehearse some of the questions to see what they're going to present or not. And so that takes place outside the courtroom, but it's just as important because that person is going to appear later in the courtroom and is going to pretty much repeat the same, hopefully. And if there's discrepancies, it could be a problem. So there should not be discrepancies due to interpretation. That's why it's very important that these cases that take place outside the courtroom are also covered by people who are certified to do the job as court interpreters. Witness interviews, social services evaluations, psychological evaluations sometimes are ordered by the court but are done outside the courtroom, and then the reports are presented to the judge, and decisions are made based on these evaluations. So it's very important that these evaluations are also conducted with the help of a certified, qualified interpreter to make sure that the content of the evaluation and what the witness said or what the person being evaluated said has been interpreted properly, because decisions are made on that. And just as important as a witness testimony in the courtroom, the interpretation has to be just as faithful in these situations that take place outside the courtroom but have an effect in the cases that happen in court. So they should use also court certified interpreters for this, and most cases they use us. Sometimes people don't know that they should do that, and you may be called to do something that you may not be qualified to do, and I would recommend that you turn it down if you don't feel sure you can cover it. So this is an idea of things that you will be called upon to cover once you're certified, and so we're going to train so that you can do all these interpretations in all these different situations and settings. Another kind of interpreter is the conference interpreter. That's a completely different setting. In that case, to be a conference interpreter, you may be interpreting just into one language, typically your native language, and it's all simultaneous, and you're working in a booth with a colleague taking turns, just like you would do at trials in court. So part of the training that we do in court helps also for conference interpreting, and some conference interpreters are also court interpreters and vice versa. My course does not cover conference interpretation, which is for international meetings, business, science, etc. But we do simultaneous interpretation for court proceedings, which is part of what you would do. I mean, the simultaneous part is what you would do for conference as well on different topics. As a court interpreter, you have to be able to interpret in different modes of interpretation, and you have to go into both directions as opposed to conference, where you can go into one direction only, your main language, your native, or your number one language, your A language, some people call it. In court, you would have to use two languages all of the time and have that command of the language at this pretty much the same level. Of course, we always have one language that's stronger than the other. That's the native language, the language we studied, the language we grew up speaking is our A language or native. Now, the second language that you would be using should be at about the same level in order to be able to interpret in court, because you have to be able to go back and forth from one to the other. So it's very important then that when you think of taking this training, that you are really bilingual when you start training for this, because this training is not for people to learn the language. It's for people who already know a second language at a very high level and that can interpret professionally in the courtroom. So a court interpreter is a trained professional that has a certification. Certification is really a requirement to work in court, although in some cases with some languages there is no certification, and so people are called to interpret without a certification, but they are vetted in some other ways. In my language pair, Spanish, there is really no need to call upon non-certified interpreters, because there are a lot of certified interpreters that can do the job, and really that is a requirement to be certified to work in the courtroom. We start the proceeding taking an oath and stating our qualifications, and cases have been challenged because of the use of non-certified interpreters. So anybody who's working that's eligible, maybe well qualified, I recommend that they train and really try to obtain the certification. My goal with this program is to help more people get certified. really that's the minimum standard of practice these days to work in court. So as I said, we need to start by being bilingual, but being bilingual is not just enough to work in court. Being bilingual is the start to be able to train to get that certification. Court interpreters are professionals as opposed to just bilingual people, are bilingual people who train into the profession of court interpreting and obtain the certification. So when I walk in the courtroom, I do my job as a professional, not just somebody who speaks the language and is doing somebody a favor there. So what does it mean to be bilingual? As I said, to have equal command or almost equal command of both languages. How do we become certified? Well, we have to prepare to take the test, and the test is going to measure your performance into the 3 ways of interpretation that we need to use in court: consecutive, simultaneous, and sight interpretation. So the test consists of different passages, 2 that test consecutive skills, where you need to interpret from English into a foreign language and from foreign language into English. And that mode of interpretation, the consecutive mode, is only used in court when a witness is on the stand practically. I say only, it could be for an interview outside the courtroom too. You can use consecutive. But in the courtroom, the consecutive mode of interpretation is used when a witness is on the stand who doesn't speak English as his first language or who has difficulty speaking English. So he will be giving the testimony in a foreign language, and all the rest of the participants in the case, judge, attorneys, defendant, jurors, witnesses, anybody who has a stake in the case is going to be listening to this witness on the stand in a foreign language. They're not going to understand unless they speak that same language, and maybe a couple of people do in the courtroom, but most of the times that's not the case. And even if that's the case, the testimony of the witness is interpreted into English for everybody in the courtroom. So that interpretation is what's in evidence, and it's to be, of course, very accurate. Is the interpretation that's being taken down and transcribed by the court reporter, is the interpretation that the jurors are listening to and making their decisions and observations on. As the interpretation that becomes the evidence. So is the testimony of the witness as being interpreted. So stakes are very high, and somebody has to be very, very proficient to do that job. That is done in consecutive mode so that the record is very clear and everybody can hear the interpretation into English, and the record is clear. The reporter is taking down the interpretation. And when the questions are being asked in English of that witness doesn't understand the question until it's been interpreted. So it's consecutive because the interpreter hears the question, there's a pause, interpreter renders the question, witness answers in the foreign language, and interpreter renders it into English for the record. So as I said, that's the consecutive mode, and it's used when the witness is on the stand. Say I'm interpreting for a defendant. He's going to be listening to that witness on the stand, and is going to be listening to the witness on the stand in the language that he understands, and then is going to hear the English. The English doesn't matter much to him. The English is for the rest of the people that participate in the court proceeding. But it's for the benefit of the defendant, in fact, who has the right to participate in the proceeding and help in his defense. So the rest of the proceeding I'm going to be interpreting is going to be simultaneous. Only when a witness is on the stand that doesn't speak English is going to be consecutive. When I'm interpreting for a defendant, the rest of the proceeding, opening statements, jury instructions, closing arguments, other witnesses on the stand that speak English, I'm going to be interpreting simultaneously into, in my case, into Spanish, into whatever language you interpret, into the foreign language for the defendant. All that is done simultaneously. We're not slowing the proceeding, going phrase by phrase, sentence by sentence, and asking attorneys and judges to speak slowly because we need to interpret. We need to interpret at the speed people speak simultaneously for the defendant so he can hear it all. That's what we do most of the time in court. Criminal cases, the defendant has to hear his accusers, to defend himself, and he needs to hear everything that's going on in English, interpreted into his own language. So all that is done simultaneously. Only the portion that a witness that doesn't speak English is on the stand, and that witness may be the same defendant that's testifying in his own defense, or maybe other witnesses, or maybe victims, or maybe expert witnesses. If they speak foreign language, we interpret consecutive. If the witnesses speak English, we interpret simultaneously. And that's most of the trials, unless all participants are foreign language speakers. And then sight interpretation is the other mode of interpretation you're going to be tested on, because we also do this in court occasionally. Fortunately, it shouldn't be done too often because there's a lot at stake, and we cannot interpret convoluted documents, complex documents, or long documents that are presented as evidence without having read them before. We cannot really sight interpret on the spot and do a very good job. Usually when we have documents that are presented as evidence, they are translated before they are presented as evidence in the trial, and they're shared with the other parties. So because as all evidence is in discovery, they're shared. So really, sometimes people would request this, oh, by the way, I have this document, but it's in Spanish or it's in Urdu. Can you, Madam Interpreter, read it out loud? Well, if it's a long document, we should not be doing it, really. We should approach the judge and explain. If it's something short, we often do it because there are cases that are that have some urgency. For example, in cases of domestic violence, that are hearings that are set on short notice and there are no attorneys, or there's an attorney but it's a last minute thing, and there have been threats done, say by text message or a letter or something, and this happened last night, and you know, this morning these people are in court and one is accused of threatening or whatever, and the evidence is in a text, in written form, or in a letter, and it wasn't translated, there was no time, or the person didn't know, or there was no attorney, and so they come up with that, and so they're going to ask the interpreter to interpret that, to render that orally. It's called sight interpretation because you're reading from a document and you're interpreting orally. Some people call this sight translation, and some people say it's equivalent. Well, it's used both, the two terms are used to refer to the same thing, but I believe the correct term is sight interpretation, although you will find both terms referring to the same thing, because translation is always written. And in this case, you go from the written to the oral rendition. So you're reading from a piece of paper, a document, whatever, and you're rendering it orally. So as I say, if it's a letter, a text message, maybe challenging or not, but it's something that can be done and sometimes should be done. If it's a long document, a contract or something like that, or some report that involves involves terminology that you may not be familiar with, you know, that was written by experts. It should be translated with time and, you know, in full. And if you're doing it sight, you're going to be short on some aspects. It's very hard to render a full and faithful interpretation at first reading of some documents. So, and if it's not going to be full and faithful rendition, it shouldn't be presented as such. And we should disclose that to the judge who say, well, you know, you asked for time to read it, and then you decide if you can do it or not, and you let the judge know that. But many of the times that we're presented with things to cite, interpret are things that are really doable. It's not easy, but it's doable, and we should be prepared to do that. So what other things do we need to pass the exam? Well, we need to be very good at all these three modes of interpretation, because all of the exam all that the exam test is our skills in these modes of interpretation and into both languages. So consecutive, from and to English, and into foreign language, into English. Simultaneous is tested into the foreign language, really, not into English, but we really should be able to do it both ways, because oftentimes we have to do that in court as well. Particularly when there's overlapping or there are objections, and also in depositions. Unless you revert to simultaneous, even if you were doing consecutive, when there's overlapping, you're not going to get all of it in. So sometimes we do a mix of them. We also need to study some theory, and you're going to be quizzed about that. And for that reason, I included those standalone webinars on theory. Some people already have the practice done and they only need the theory, or some people do the theory as a review. We have to study the ethics of court interpreting, what the code of ethics means, and how to properly apply the code of ethics. And in order to do this, you have to start from step 1, which is enroll, submit the application to take the exam. So if you're planning to study to take the exam, say you want to do the practice courses with me, I would recommend start with Court Interpreting 1 and proceed to Court Interpreting 2 and 3, because the level of difficulty increases with each level, and we're going to cover it all with those 3 levels. But I'll say don't wait till you have studied all that, which would take you about 9 months if you do one after the other. Don't wait to submit the application to enroll to take the exam. First things first, enroll, submit the application, figure out what the dates are, see what they request in your state. Pretty much all the states request the same. First that you submit the application. There are some resources in the state web page. I put here the one in Maryland, but all the states have something similar. Maryland Judiciary or whatever state judiciary, and type Court Interpreting Program and look at what are the requirements. And as I said, do that as you are preparing, as you're studying, before you start, in the middle, before you finish, because this takes some time. And they don't test every day, they don't test every month. They test once a year, twice a year, depending on the state. So you don't want to wait till you're done this 9-month course and then you have to wait another year to sit for the exam. I mean, you can, but there's no reason to wait, because the process takes some time. So first you get on a list, then they're going to invite you to take some workshops in most cases. In Maryland, I know they do that, orientation workshops, where they tell you what you need to study. What I'm telling you now, and I don't know what else, depending on who's giving it. So they tell you what the process is, and they tell you, and they also, in some cases, administer some oral interview in which they test the level of the command of language. English in general is to filter for command of English, because sometimes there are many people that apply for this that really have no hope of passing. If the command of English is not good enough, you can't be a court interpreter. Makes no sense to sit for the exam and to pay for the fees and to have people administering the exam. So really, in some cases, the OPI, as they call it, which is a oral interview, is done to test the level of English, and it's an informal interview. So these are pre-requirements in order to be invited to sit for the test. And as I said, this may take a year, may take some months. So first, find out from your state what you need to do and what the dates are. When are the workshops? How to get on the list? How are you going to be invited? So you don't miss the testing date and you have fulfill all the prerequisites in order to sit for the exam. As I said, orientation may be a requirement, oral interview, written test, different steps for different languages too in some cases, in some states. So find out from your state judiciary page, court interpreting, what you need to register to get certified to take the test. And then start studying, or start studying and do that, but do that as early as you can so that you don't miss the testing date and you don't have to wait a full year. Okay, so I'm repeating myself. I already told you need to be bilingual to practice and study. I can't say it enough. You need to practice a lot. Some people think, well, they're bilingual, they already know how to speak the foreign language and that's all that's needed. And no, that's just the start. You need to practice a lot to develop the skills to be doing this. Of course, there's a lot of thinking. It's a very taxing job to be doing simultaneous and consecutive, long consecutive, and it's very taxing on your memory, and you have to have a very good command of the language and great vocabulary in all sorts of topics, because we have to interpret not just legal terminology, with people think that's the worst. Oh my gosh, it's so difficult, it's all legal. Well, legal terminology, of course, if you're working in a legal setting, but in the legal setting, people talk about all sorts of things. And there are medical experts, forensic experts, computer forensics, firearms, all sorts of specialties that come up in trials because expert witnesses are called, crime reconstructionist. I mean, all topics that we don't talk about at the dinner table. If you grew up speaking the language and you're very fluent and you talk since you were a child to your mom and dad, well, I'm sure you don't talk about forensics at the dinner table. There's another set of vocabulary that you have to learn. And you need to prepare for every case that you are you're going to be dealing with. So there's a lot of reading, and you need to be able to do this very, very fast. You don't have the time when you're interpreting in court to be looking up things in the dictionary. You may look up one word, 2 words, ask your colleague to look up for something, come up with a better term the next time. But really you have to render the interpretation as people are speaking. So that requires high level of skill, and that's what we're going to be training for, to develop that muscle memory so that you're going to come up with the rendition, as you hear whatever the person keeps talking about, you are rendering in simultaneous mode. You are listening to one language and rendering the interpretation into another while you keep listening into the language the speaker is speaking and processing and delivering into the other language. There is no stop. There's a little bit of lagging, but there is no big pause for you to be researching like when you do translation at home. That you can take all the time in the world, and you can research and do translation on topics that you had not studied before. You can take the time to study and research. In court, you have to have it. Either you have it or you don't. Okay, how long does it take? Well, this really depends on the individual. It depends where you start. It depends what you know when you start, and it depends how many hours of practice you put. So I say my program is developed to be covered in 9 months. And realistically, in 9 months, you will have enough practice to be able to pass the exam, assuming you start when you start your bilingual, and that you practice almost every day, ideally every day, for those 9 months, not just the once a week when we're going to be meeting for the webinar. Once a week, we're going to be doing an hour and some, because every webinar is 1 hour plus question and answers, so up to another half hour, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 10, and maybe half hour. But it's programmed for 1 hour of content where you're going to be doing practice, and then you're going to practice the same during the week, and I'm going to give you some more passages similar to those for you to practice at home. So a lot of drilling, and unless you do it frequently, you don't acquire the skill and the speed that you need to pass the test. So that's why I say 9 months. It depends on the hours of practice that you have, and I have recommendations as to how much, and when you come closer to the exam, I recommend that you do more frequently, more intensively. But the best is to practice some every day. And if you can practice every day the 3 modes, even if it's 10 minutes of each, that's half hour a day. It doesn't sound like much, but it's cumulative. And that is much better than sitting on a Saturday or a Sunday and doing 4 or 5 hours. That doesn't work. Once a week, 4 or 5 hours is not going to get you the muscle memory that you need. Your brain is going to work well the first 45 minutes to an hour, and then forget it. You're going to be repeating the same thing, but you're not really going to acquire much more knowledge or practice. So ideally, you want to do a little every day, and that way you train as you train to run a marathon. Okay, you can run, everybody can run. I can run 1 block, maybe 2. Some people can run for miles, and some people run marathons, and some people win marathons. Well, the ones that win the marathon, the ones that run the marathon, train every day, every week. And you have to look at this. Simultaneous interpreting for court is like running a marathon. So unless you train frequently, you're not going to be able to do it. And once you train frequently enough to get the necessary level to pass a test and to start working in court, it's also important to keep doing it and keep studying. When you take breaks and you don't do it for a while, you become rusty. That's not good. So you need to develop the skill and practice the skill all the time. So you're going to be building the skills, honing your skills, and then keeping your skills once you are at the level for the certification or you have passed the certification. So some people are already certified and are taking my classes. I take classes myself. I go to the ATA, NAGIT, all the professional associations. One, because I'm required to keep my skills up and to show proof of that, to keep my certification. You have to do continuing education. But 2, because I know it's really needed, it's really important. And so I offer those theory courses too, that some of my colleagues also take it. And it's good to keep doing skills building and practice after you have the certification, and do it on a frequent basis. Sometimes I don't have much work in court, I have to be honest. Sometimes you work to death, you work a trial and you're totally exhausted, and sometimes you have short hearings and a lot of wait in between. And sometimes there's 2 cases, sometimes there's 10, sometimes there's nothing, and sometimes you wait in the courtroom for hours until they call your case, which is half hour or 20 minutes. Well, when you're training or when you need that practice, instead of being waiting, doing nothing, you can be taking notes, you can be looking things up, you can be practicing in your head, which is not the same as saying out loud, but it helps. And then you realize what you need or where you would get stuck, and then you go look up the words for when you really have to do that. In another case, that was not your case you were practicing with, but sure enough, at one point or another, you will have to interpret that same thing that you are listening to while you're waiting for your case to be called. So that's another way to practice during the week too. As I said, I'm going to be giving you homework recommendations. And my recommendation is to drill, practice, practice makes perfect. And you need that muscle memory and develop the multitasking skills in order to be able to perform well in simultaneous. That is something very doable, but not without putting the time to develop. Once it's stored in your brain and you have practiced enough, then you will have it stored and you will access it very easily, almost without thinking. Just as when we're speaking, I mean, you're expressing your ideas. When you speak in your own language, you're not thinking, oh, well, is this masculine, feminine? What article do I use? Do I put this first? Do I put the adjective first? Do I put the noun first? If you need to be thinking of all that, means that you don't have the level of command of the language that you need. Same with vocabulary. Either you have it stored in your knowledge base in your head because you have practiced enough and it will come up, or you don't. And if you don't, you need to go practice some more. Well, I have here a recommendation as to how much you should study, but I don't know if you want to see this now, but my idea is as much as possible. It's very important to plan to study systematically to prepare for the test. That's why I developed the program doing 12 weeks plus 12 weeks plus 12 weeks, and I recommend to do one after the other. If you do 12 weeks and then you don't do anything, and then next, you do 6 months of nothing or doing something else, and then after 6 months you're going to take course 2, you may have forgotten really what you did in course 1. It's not going to come up so easily. So ideally, once you start to study, you develop a certain pattern of practice. Plan to study systematically. As I said, every day is ideal. I recommend for level 1, start with 1 hour a day. Well, if you can't do 1 hour, do 30 minutes. But then, what I said is how long will it take? It depends how much time you put in. So you will get there eventually. I can't promise you're going to all do it within the same time frame, but with systematic practice every day, 1 hour a day is 5 hours, 5 hours a week, or 2 hours, then it's 10 hours a week, plus times 12 weeks, you would have put 60 hours of practice, or 120. And then for level 2 and level 3, I recommend 2 hours a day. You may think that's too much. It may be. Well, you can do less, as I said, but rather than, what I recommend is try to do it frequently. If it's not 2 hours, if it's 30 minutes, if it's 20 minutes every day, it's always better than just once a week or twice a week. And then for the exam, intensify. And I would say if you do before sitting for the exam, instead 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day, to 4 hours a day, for a period of 5 weeks, 1 month, you put another 100 hours, you will be very confident when you sit for the exam. And that's what you need to be very sure to have your knowledge ingrained so that it comes up very fast. So the beginner level, what we're going to be covering is the basics of court interpretation, the modes of interpretation required to interpret, part of the theory, court protocol, code of ethics for professional interpreters, and every webinar we'll be doing a lot of practice. So practice will encompass hearings typically heard in district court, workers' compensation, traffic court, misdemeanor, and civil cases. Civil and some criminal as well, but shorter hearings than you would see in level 3 or level 2 where we'll do full trials. In court interpreting 2, then we'll do more complex civil cases and trials by bench or jury, criminal cases. I put there bench trial, but there's part of a jury trial as well. And we'll go into the differences and what you need to interpret and how, and examples of things that that present challenges, and we'll do plenty of examples so that you will master that. The complexity increases with each level. So some people can start by court interpreting 2. If you have been practicing for a while and you're confident you know the basics, you can start by the intermediate level. I have no problem with that. So that really you have to self-assess. So I said for court interpreting 2, people who sign up for this should either have completed court interpreting 1 or have prior training or experience, that they are already confident they can do shorter hearings, because in court interpreting 2 we'll do longer hearings. Court interpreting 3 would be the most advanced, and I will do the most complex cases here. I'd ask for people to sign up to this once they have completed court interpreting 2 or 1 and 2, depending on the case. Here we'll do trials by judge or jury and also expert witness testimony, which is the most complicated, really the most challenging thing to interpret, because we cannot be experts on everything, but we should train to be able to interpret the witnesses. And those experts on the stand are the hardest thing to interpret simultaneously because of the complexity of what they are explaining, and because some of them really are not really talking to the, I mean, some have great experience in trials and that's all they do, but most of them are experts on their field, but they're not experts at presenting their evidence, and so they're not very deliberate in their delivery, and you have to first be able to hear them clearly. Sometimes they are mumbling, sometimes they are speaking in very convoluted ways, as if they were talking to experts in their field. So doctors to doctors or forensic experts to forensic experts. And you know, the lawyers have to try to make them come down a notch so that the jurors can understand what they're talking about. But you know, initially when they start speaking and when they present their credentials and when they start explaining, if they are not trained in presenting in court, and this is the 1 time they're called or the 2 times they're called to present witness testimony in court, and you're not familiar with the subject matter, it is very challenging. So we need to practice for that, and we need to be prepared to expect that, because the experts do come in trials, and they take a lot of time. And also we'll be working in team interpreting, which is what the way that we cover the trials. We work in teams of 2. And we're coming to the end. This is, I don't know if this pertains to you. If you have certification from, say, ATA, if you're a translator or and you need CEUs, ATA approves 10 CEUs per each 12-week course. Really, it's more than 12 hours that you'll be taking with each of these courses, but 10 units is the maximum they approve per course, but that's plenty. Most of us, in my case, I need to do, to keep my certification in the state of Maryland, I request 16 units every 2 years. So 10 is a good number. Usually when you attend professional association workshops or seminars, you have to travel, you have to be there, you have to sit through different conferences. Some are interesting, some are not so interesting, and you get 1 or 2 points or 3, and you have to be, writing it all down to collect your points. So one of these courses will give you 10 CEUs. The standalone courses is the number of hours is 1.5 or 2 hours for the standalone webinars. And those are the ones that I said some of the people that are certified take those also because of the CEUs. At the moment, I don't have approval from Maryland or from state courts for CEUs, but I'm working on that. I'm hopeful that they will grant it because they request people to do continuing education. They're always looking for courses that offer that, and so I haven't gotten that approved yet, but I'm working on that, and I'm hoping it will be approved. And also some organizations that require CEUs, I will, you are supposed to present that, and then they decide if they approve it or not. I will give a certificate to everybody who participates, stating what course they took and the number of hours. So I have some, I don't know if some of you who are listening are in this category, because some people I've been in contact with or responded to my emails. I have asked this question, if it's, these courses are good for ASL interpreters, if they give such, for example, I know the ASL interpreters also need the CEUs, and so some people would like to take for that. Really, the theory courses are good for anybody who interprets any language. They are language neutral, they are taught in English, and they cover topics that all interpreters should know. Except, well, no exceptions. Sign interpreters also do team interpreting. Of course, it's from the point of view of the spoken language interpreter, because that's my specialty, but it applies to sign interpreters as well. And the courses have been developed, particularly the consecutive passages and the side passages. I have developed it in English and Spanish, which is my language combination, but any person with knowledge of the foreign language can go from the English into the foreign language. The topics are the same, and the passages, I have some adapted to all English, so that if interpreters of other languages can use the same passages to practice into their language combination. Okay, so it's not just for Spanish. So, and with that, that's my last slide. That's my presentation. That concludes my part of my part, because I'm going to be responding to your questions. If you have questions, ask if possible to write them down in the chat, and I will read them out loud and answer to everybody. That would be the best way. If not, we'll take turns on the microphone and pray that there is no feedback, because sometimes that's why I prefer not to have people on the microphone, because sometimes we have this feedback. But depending on the equipment everybody's using. But I'm open for questions now. Let me see if I see the chat here. So far nobody's chatting, and I say up to 30 minutes if you want to use it. If you have one question. If you have 10 questions and can answer in the 30 minutes, great. If you don't have questions, fine too.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How much are the courses?
Okay, all the prices are published in my webpage, www.courtinterpretertrainingonline.com. The 12-week courses are $300 for 12 weeks. So you do the math, I think it's less than 20-something, less than $30 per webinar. The standalone webinars on theory, which are an hour and a half each, are $45. And then there's another course that I didn't mention here because I think all we have here are beginners. We have developed this for people who are taking the exam, and the first one is going to be in November, end of October or November. It's an intensive course for exam preparation. So people who have already trained and are ready to take the exam can do 2 weeks of intensive training. That would be every day an hour and a half for 10 days, and that's $400. And all of that is published. You don't need to take notes. Go to my page and go to scheduled courses, and you have the dates, and you have the prices, and I update that frequently. So you'll see that there's a list of courses there, and some have dates and some say to be announced because they're planned for a future date. But as I say, I update that frequently. So if you are interested, check what's available and see if you are interested in signing up. I will take up to 12 students per course of the practice webinars. So of the level 1, level 2, level 3, I have 2 dates published now, September of this year, September through the beginning of December, because we're skipping Thanksgiving. And then we have a second date. I'm talking from memory because if I change the screen, if I fool with my computer, it blocks my presentation. So, but it's the beginning of January, the Court Interpreting 2. And I'm going to open another one, Court Interpreting 1, also in January, but I haven't put that date yet. So there's going to be one every 3 months. So if you don't make the first date in September, Court Interpreting 1, don't think there's not going to be one next year, because there's going to be one, most likely the beginning of January to maybe February. So that I published the dates for Court Interpreting 1 September, Court Interpreting 2 January 2018, and after that there's going to be Court Interpreting 3, of course, for those who finish with Court Interpreting 2. So on the list you'll see that's the availability of courses, and the date for Court Interpreting 3 is pending. And for the theory webinars also I did I think 2 or 3, I don't remember now, but I will recycle those as well. So there's 5 standalone webinars on theory, team interpreting, which I'm going to be repeating because that's a favorite one. I just did one, and now the next one, it says to be announced, because the next one I'm going to do on theory is ethics. Then I'm going to do court protocol, and I have to decide if I do team interpreting or use of equipment next, depending on the interest. But I mean, all are in the, our planned courses to be done. So if you don't catch it at 1 month, you'll catch it another. But they're all published.
Can I ask you to repeat the website? I'm sorry.
To repeat the website? Oh, yes.
Your website?
Sorry, yes. Court Interpreter Training Online, all together.
Court Interpreter, you're breaking up. Court Interpreter what?
Court Interpreter Training Online.com.
Okay.
if you look, did you receive the newsletter?
No.
Oh, how did you get invited? Oh, okay, then check your spam folder, because I believe if you got invited it's because at some point I sent you an email or something, or maybe somebody forwarded you my email. It's not if you I do
I got it. I wrote it down.
You wrote it down? Okay. I should put it on my here. See at the bottom of the page on the screen? Oh, you are on the phone. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so you want
I have another question.
Yes.
Yeah, one more question. So what happens if a certified court interpreter doesn't continue with the required continuing education? Do they lose their certification, or does it become inactive? Do they have to take the exam again?
You know, that's not a question I can answer. I think you should ask the administrators in the state court that administer the court interpreter program in each state. I believe they are taken off the list. I don't know if they're required to take the exam again to become active. These policies change, and this is a new requirement to do continuing education. Relatively new. I think it's 2 years old, so it's relatively new for the state courts. Before that, there was no requirement to do continuing education. It was just an expectation, and many of us did it without being asked. But now they made it a requirement. Now, before this was a requirement, I know people that were certified in other states and long ago, and then they moved to Maryland. I say Maryland because that's where I knew it happened. Somebody in particular was somebody from California, I remember. It's a friend of mine, moved to Maryland. She worked in courts in California for years, then didn't work as a court interpreter for I don't know how many years because she decided to do something else. And then she came to Maryland and she said, yeah, I'm court certified, and put me on the list. And they said, no, you have to take the test. So I already took the test so many years ago. Well, she had to sit for the test. She was very upset. But I see the logic in that, because really she hadn't practiced for I don't know how many years. And when she got certified, the requirements were different. So a lot of people got grandfathered in the profession many years ago without really having all the chops. So who knows, you know, I mean, after many years. And so if you don't continue practicing, and you don't do the continuing education, and you don't practice, you lose your skills. So, but as I don't know if you become inactive, if they require you to retest. I know you will be taken off the list, so the courts will not be able to call you. I don't know that that's equivalent of losing the certification. In my book, it pretty much is, but I really don't know about the policy and if you're going to be required, asked to, offered to take the test again, or do some other kind of remedy. I don't know what they do. I know you need to comply with that to remain active and in the list. Okay, so but I would suggest that question, you can write an email to the administrator of the court interpreting program in your state, and you will get that answer.
Okay.
Okay. I still don't see questions on the chat, so mic is open for those who are on the phone. Going back to your question, I just thought of something else about losing the certification. I also know people who lost the certification because of complaints, proven complaints, because there was an investigation. People did not follow the code of ethics, and you can really mess up big time. It's very important to be professional and act professional and not step the line. And so this person, I don't know that she did it intentionally or with any malice, but because of crossing the line of not acting ethically, there were complaints, there were problems, they got reported, got investigated, and she lost the license. Basically, one of the most frequent complaints was that she was practicing law without a license, which is a very tempting thing to do after you interpret for a long time and you think you know all the answers and you know what's best for people. But you can't be recommending course of action. You can't tell people what to do. You have to stick to your role of interpreter. And you can't be advising people on your own. And this person was doing that. And it caused a lot of problem, and it got reported by attorneys and people who had a stake, and got investigated, and she lost the license, the certification, not the licenses. In Texas, there's a license, not in Maryland. And I can tell you that person is not invited to take the exam again. It's not a question of the skills. It's a question of that this person refused to act according to the code of ethics that we swear to abide by when you become certified, and you take an oath every day in every case you do to do certain things and not to disclose information, privileged information, and to interpret faithfully, accurately, and completely, and to be neutral. And if you're not neutral, if you disclose privileged information, if you give advice, if you act as a lawyer when you're not, that's going against the code of ethics. And you may be a very good interpreter, but if you're doing those things, you are, you know, you can be expelled from the decertified and not be asked to, or not be invited to certify again. It's akin to a lawyer being disbarred, you know. I don't know that this person is going to be ever going to be offered the possibility of certifying again, you know. But that's an extreme case, but it can happen. So in those cases, you lose it, and that's it.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I don't see any questions. I wait for 2 or 3 more minutes, and if there are no questions, I'm going to close it. Okay, so okay, I see a question coming up. Will you get the certificate and see you for this presentation? Oh. Okay, I didn't think of that, and Nahid is asking if I will get a certificate and see use for this presentation. I did not think of that, but I don't see why not. Really, I mean, you took the time, and I took the time, and I've been teaching about code interpreting, an introductory course, so I think I can do that. What I'm going to ask you, because I really don't, I mean, I see some names there. I know who I invited. I don't know all who attended. Well, I see by caller number, or in some cases I see an email. Nahid Flanagan is one. I suppose that's your full name. And yes, I can send the certificate to your email address, which I have because I invited you to this. But I will ask everybody who wants this certificate to please send me an email with the name as you want it to appear on the certificate, okay? So that I write your full name and not just your email, because in some cases I have emails and no full names. So just to make sure. So Anahit, I think I have yours. The rest of you, yes, I can do the certificate for you to present for CEUs, and it will state that you attended the presentation of 1 hour. Just write down your name as you want it to appear, in case I just have your email. Okay, good question. Thank you, Anahit. I didn't think of that, but yes, why not? You heard my answer, right? I don't need to type it down. But it's great that you can type it and I can read it for everybody. See, the sound is much better when there's only one mic. Thank you. Okay. So what do you think of the next question, if there is any? I like to let you know that my next webinar will be on ethics, and it will be next Saturday, July the 8th, and that's published, and that's all theory on ethics and code of ethics. And the next one is going to be on core protocol, and that's going to be July the 22nd. So those are the two planned for the month of July. And I do these introductory presentations for free, not the theory webinars that I told you about. Those are $45 each. This introductory, I'm going to repeat, as you heard in the beginning, there was somebody that took it last month. I repeat it the same every month, sometimes twice a month when people are interested. I've done this presentation at universities, I'm going to do one at ATA. It's just to tell people what it takes to be certified and what they need to put in if they're interested before they sign up for a course. And I'm hoping some people will sign up and some will not, but I don't want people to sign up for a 12-week course that are not prepared to that. So because I get a lot of people interested that say, oh, I took 3 courses of Spanish in high school and I want to become an interpreter, and I don't want to take their money because they're not going to be able to do lesson 1 and they're not going to be able to be certified in 9 months. They're going to need years to do that. So I want to let people know what it takes, that it takes more than you know, elementary knowledge of a language. So if they have what it takes and are willing to take the course, I am willing to train them. And the next training course is going to start in September, Course Interpreting 1. So those are the practice courses that I said are divided into 3 levels, Course 1, 2, 3. So the next one is September, and I hope some of you are interested. If not September, January next year. If you know somebody who's interested and would like to know what it takes about and wants to do this free presentation, tell them to write me an email, forward them my newsletter, that if I have you on my list, you will be receiving, every time I do updates, you will be receiving a newsletter. So you will be informed about the next courses and what I'm doing. Apart from being able to go to my webpage and check in, you will be receiving a newsletter. So please share that with friends if you know anybody interested. If you know people interested in the free introductory, I'm happy to do this. I will be repeating it. Don't have the next date, but I will publish it soon. Anyway, I take down the email addresses of the people who are interested, and then once I have the date, I invite everybody like I did with you. And thank you all for participating. I see your message and I hit thank you. My pleasure to be able to share what I know. I hope you think of this as a career, and if you do and want to get your certification and I can help you with that, I will be most happy to have you in my classes. Thank you very much.